gentlemen, welcome to Tony D'Angelo's PM Coast to Coast. Now, here's your host, Tony D'Angelo.
And a very good morning to you. This is Tony D'Angelo on Tony D'Angelo's PM Coast to Coast. It's kind of the AM edition. We're getting started early today. Our guest is a familiar one to most of you, Professor Bob Swick, a Connecticut resident, an economist, a college professor, and one who has been an ardent observer of the Connecticut political and economic scene. We're going to be talking about the recent state budget just passed in Connecticut. And if you're not in Connecticut, I believe there's going to be a lot in this discussion which is going to be applicable to you depending on the state you're in. If your state's doing things well, these are things perhaps you may want to pay attention to. If your state's not doing things well, all the more reason. So sit back and let's have a little fun this morning, and we will be getting Bob on in a moment. I can't wait. This is probably one of the better shows we're going to have this year. We'll be right back right after this. Just hold on a little bit longer. I promise you, it'll be worth it.
Buckle up for safety, buckle up. Buckle up for safety, always buckle up. Pull your seatbelt snug, give an extra tug. Buckle up for safety, buckle up.
Buckle up for safety, buckle up. Buckle up for safety, always buckle up. Show the world you care by the belt you wear. Buckle up for safety when you're driving. Buckle up for safety, buckle up. Buckle up for safety, always buckle up. Put your mind at ease, tell your rider please. Get your seatbelts buckled, everybody buckle up.
The National Safety Council says, if you don't have seatbelts, get them. If you do have seatbelts, use them. Seatbelts can and do save lives every day.
Buckle up for safety, everybody buckle up.
Alerting the stations up and down the line, Professor Bob Swick, right after this interlude. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to have as my guest today, as promised, Professor Bob Swick. Bob, as you know, is a frequent contributor to this show. He is a college professor, an economist, an ardent observer of the Connecticut political scene and the national political scene and the national economic scene. And he's been doing a lot of observing. Bob has been the sort of the wall watcher for everything that's taken place. I won't call him sort of the wall watcher. I'll call him the wall watcher ever since our local legislative session began. I am a Connecticut resident, as most of you know, and I'm pleased to welcome Bob this morning. Bob, how are you, my friend?
Good, Tony. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Oh, believe me, I look forward to it. And I was, if you were... If you were on social media this morning, you saw my beloved dog Schnitzel chasing after a turtle who was probably a little bit bigger than he was. And as I was walking, the few lucid moments I had in doing this, in preparing for this, I realized that we have a lot of people that listen. They listen from within the state of Connecticut, without the state of Connecticut. As we say in my trade, they're former Connecticut people. And, so I like to have a broad perspective and then take it in locally. Can you explain to, quote unquote, the ignorant or the masses what took place this week?
Well, state of Connecticut
Certainly.
And also will impact our ability of personal freedoms with some simplistic changes that have been made with new taxes at the same time. But first I want to get into the business tax issues. Two areas which are going to severely impact business and industry in the state of Connecticut. The first one is a family leave personal medical act that is going to be implemented where all individuals in the state of Connecticut who work will be paying a 0.5% tax of their income up to a particular cap of roughly $600 to $1,000 per year to fund individuals who wish to want to take family leave to take care of a ill family member, however that may be defined, and or illness. And those individuals will be able to receive up to, believe it or not, $1,000 of their income from this particular act. As far as I'm concerned, trying to understand the act, I don't see how it can be self-funded since there's no way of knowing how many individuals will use this particular new law to take care of the family member who's ill, and or how businesses with, let's say, 10 or less employees, if 5 of the employees decide to take it all at one time, the employer will have to allow them to take it. I don't know how the employer is going to continue to operate with only 5 employees rather than 10 employees. And I'm not too excited about having the state of Connecticut tell me I got to pay a new 0.5% tax to fund other people so they can take care of family members. I think most businesses are intelligent enough to understand if an employee has a personal issue, they try to work with that employee to help them, guide them through that situation. For example, working limited hours, taking certain time, working flex time, working from home, so on and so forth. I don't think this law is necessary in any way, shape, or form. It's just appeasing the unions of the state of Connecticut. The second big law that's really going to impact our state dramatically is the $15 minimum wage. The euphoria of liberalism in our country that we need a living wage for those people with absolutely no skills, that apparently in Connecticut, if you earn $31,200 a year, which would be the new minimum wage, 40 hours a week at $15 an hour, you're going to support a family of 4, pay for housing, pay for transportation, yada, yada, yada. I don't see how that's possible either. And I think the net result of a higher minimum wage, once it's fully implemented, will be when you go into a McDonald's or a fast food restaurant, you will be talking to a machine to put your order in, and your conveyor belt in the back will be putting your food on the belt, and you're going to be picking it up. There's going to be very few, if any, employees in that particular fast food restaurant. So many jobs are going to be lost because of that. There's also a serious amount of other nitpicking bills in there which are going to impact the business and industries in our state. One other one I want to briefly talk about, which I'm still trying to analyze, and I think you may know a little bit more about it than me, is the pass-through tax for businesses, especially for limited liability corporations. And I think that's going to truly impact businesses, especially small businesses in the state of Connecticut at the same time.
Well, in those, I'm guessing about 5 or 6 minutes, just looking at the clock, you've really said a mouthful. I'd like to more or less break this down into small bites so at least I catch it. The Family Leave Act, who or what is administrating this? I mean, to me, I look at it and I say, this is, quote unquote, the concept of insurance. And if you're insuring automobiles or if you're insuring homes or, floods or things like that, you've got a body of statistics and a body of predictability you could go to. And not only that, but those funds are analyzed from time to time, and you hope that whoever's doing the analyzing is doing it correctly so we don't end up with, quote unquote, the Big Short 2. That said, is this entirely, quote unquote, run within the state, or is some insurance company somehow got their paws in it?
No, apparently from what I can gather, it's going to be some sort of new
Well, and I mean, my concern is when you speak of it, I'm immediately thinking of the fact it's like when these, and I mean, I guess there's better parts about being older, at least I tell myself this, and I'm at the stage in my life and my career where a lot of people who are brokering investments, like brokering products, will stay away from me because they know what they're going to get. And when they would come in and they would tell me, oh, this is a guaranteed multiple of, 15, 20 or some ridiculous thing, and I'd look at them and say, excuse me, how do you guarantee a rate of return beyond something that's reasonable or you don't have the capital to support it? I said all that to say this. I think somewhere in this plan, I'm going to be as kind as I can, is some unrealistic investment multiple that can't be supported.
Correct, and it's just like the state pension shortfall. It's the same exact thing. Let's pick a number from this guy, and let's say, okay, we're going to get a 10% return, so we're not underfunding our pension obligations. Then all of a sudden, when the 10% turns into 4%, oh, we're short $60 billion. Okay, let's just bond it out and increase our long-term debt another $60 billion, and, we'll worry about our great-great-grandchildren figuring it out while we're getting our pensions and just laughing about the whole thing. And it's garbage in plain English.
Yeah, it's, let's be concerned of me and thee and forget about he. I get it. Now, the minimum wage, I was going down the road, up here with Kathy, and I said, because it has always been, as an employer, I've always asked for two things. I've always asked for, number one, stay off of my pitching mound. Don't tell me what to do. I mean, there are laws. I have to follow the laws. I get that. But make the laws fair to all so that I can do better. And if I do better, you'll get more taxes and you'll do better. Isn't this how it's supposed to work? But that said, I said to Kathy, and it dawned on me. I said, why do we need to state a minimum wage? I'll give you an example. I have a lovely young lady that works for me, and she's outstanding, and she's really a gem. Now, if I do not do, I've already got a petard to be hoist by. If I don't do what I'm supposed to do with respect to her training, her development, giving her opportunities and things like that, someone else will offer her more money and she will follow, and I will lose the benefit of all of that. And my next thought was, why do I need a state agency telling me I must do this minimum? I mean, and I guess, do we even really need minimum wages? Because if it were a free market, and the thing is, Bob, you know me, I'm not libertarian. I think libertarianism is great, but the problem is with libertarianism is you come home one night and your neighbor's building the Chrysler building next door and you can't do a thing about it. But it's like, I just think we're on a terrible slippery slope here.
I always use the example, many years ago, my first job, I was paid $1.75 an hour.
I beat you by a quarter. Go ahead.
And then when I know in high school I got a job, I was making $2.25 an hour, which was a 50-cent increase. Okay, I was doing custodial work. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world that I was taking home $40 a week, so on and so forth. So I understand there's a comprehension that inflation has really taken a toll in our economy over the past 50 years or so. At the same time, I do believe that the only economically unsustainable at the same time. Because the business cannot afford a person sweeping the floor being paid $15 an hour. It's not going to happen unless that particular business raises the cost of their product, their service, to such a point that individuals are going to say, hey, I cannot afford this anymore, therefore I will not buy it. And the fast food industry, to me, is attacking it. Retailing is attacking it by self-service cashiers, so on and so forth. The robot in the store that cleans up the spills and sweeps up the messes. All that's going to be occurring over the next few years, and many, many jobs are going to be lost. It is not economically comprehensible. All right, you want to argue for a minimum wage? It should be a free market minimum wage. Where's the supply? Where's the demand for labor? Should we be paying $12.50 an hour for a minimum wage? Possibly. Should we be paying $9 a minimum wage? Possibly also. It will depend on the situation, and it should depend on the market. The problem in Connecticut is the state of Connecticut government feels that they are the market. They are the supply and demand in our economy. They basically want a directive economy where they can tell people what they can and can't do. And this budget is a great example of it with those two laws.
And you hit on a very important thing here. And, Yogi Berra was right. You really can't observe a lot, merely by watching. And when I talk to the young people, who work for us, and I talk with other young people, and I go in the industry, and I read things. And Bob, this is quote unquote your 4-star higher echelon. This is like what I'm going to describe to you is endemic. And when let me start with my college kid. I say to her, in your state college accounting program, do they ever talk about robotics or the robot? And she looks at me with these big brown eyes and says, no, Tony, they never mention that. And Bob, it's like, and I'm just thinking, here is somebody teaching who is getting a salary from a state agency who doesn't know about the robot, doesn't care, and it's like, this is going to so revolutionize every single thing we do. So I ask myself, instead of giving people higher minimum wages, why aren't we training them for this new world? Because nobody's seeing this. No one.
Well, training for the new world would be what's a good way of putting it, would be a slap to liberalism, because liberalism is trying to portray government as being the cure-all for everyone and everything and every issue, every problem, every illness, everything that could possibly happen in our world. Liberalism somehow is going to resolve it. So the problem is there's no sense of reality anymore for many young people who feel, okay, I'm going to graduate from college, mom and dad paid for my 4 years, I'm going to walk into a business, I want to be paid $100,000 a year.
Oh, I've had those interviews, believe me. Yes, Bender.
So they have no real world experience of really what's going on. I agree with you 100% as far as technical training, robotic training, training for production, manufacturing. That's where we're really losing out, especially in the state. We need carpenters, we need electricians, we need plumbers, we need individuals who know how to operate a lathe, we need individuals that can read a micrometer. We're sorely lacking in that area in our state, and it shows with many, many manufacturers have moved out of the state. The remaining manufacturers, I really don't see many of them, are fighting for survival. It's not an economic reality, nor is it a real reality of how our economic system works.
When you have the what do they say when the president comes out and addresses Congress at the State of the Union, the honor and privilege, well, I'll be very sarcastic here, the honor and privilege of getting on our wonderful DOT-sponsored state roads in Connecticut and driving, as I do several days a week, from here down to New Haven, and going through just, what may be taking place as far as having to have eyes in the back of your head as you're driving through the city, because, it's, well, listen, this show is not about that, but It is obvious to those who come. I have clients who come who tell me about it. I have people that won't come because of it. And, which, I mean, I came to New Haven 35 years ago. And I almost 35 years ago to the day, a kid with a newspaper and a red pencil. And somebody took mercy on me and gave me a job. Wasn't the best job, but it was a job in my field that I could get started with. And so you go through all that. Okay, we make our choices. As my late wife Jean would say, we all have our druthers. That's mine. And then after just shaking my head after what I saw, I turn on the computer. The very first email I see is, we're in India and we can do your work for X. And you know something, Bob, that is repulsive to me. I never wanted to do that. That is never the type of business I wanted to portray. Get it done with people that don't know, don't care. You end up with mistake. You end up with a fabrication of what it is that you're supposed to be doing. And, your poor client many times doesn't know the difference. It's like asking me what's a good heart operation. A heart operation for $500 or $50,000, and asking me to tell the difference. Well, I'm saving $45,500. Isn't that better? But it's like, and you know something? I thought about it, and that all comes down to the thing of, do people not realize that we play on a world stage, and people in foreign countries are competing for what we think is so indigenous to what we do here? And guess what, folks? It isn't. We have to be better.
Correct. And we have to have the tools and the training and and real education to allow generation upon generation to become productive, to contribute to society, to pay their fair share of taxes, and to continue to grow our economic system and our economy. I agree with you 100%. Outsourcing, to me, has damaged our economy to a large degree. And as much as people dislike President Trump, his economic policies of tariffs, along with trying to bring multinational corporations back to this country, are working, whether anyone wants to believe it or not, because our unemployment rates are at their lowest level in years. And why is that? Because there's more jobs being created because businesses are coming back to the United States. And that's what we really need. If our economic system is going to compete realistically with China, with Russia, with India, with the new-founded Vietnams that are attacking us to try to get jobs there, I agree with you 100%, Tony. We need to keep our jobs based here. We need to give generation upon generation graduating the skills, the tools, the education, the training they need to provide for themselves so they can get married, they can start families, and our economic system and our society continues. And I think, unfortunately, we're in the minority now with this belief, because somehow liberalism has taken over literally every thought process that people have, especially in Connecticut, that, again, Connecticut government will answer all my problems. I just call up Hartford, and the result will occur overnight. It's not going to happen. It's a fool's dream.
Well, what did Dwight Eisenhower say? A country that cannot produce its own goods and services from within cannot be a superpower?
Correct.
Yeah, I guess, silly old man, I guess he knew nothing. He only, he only won the Second World War, I guess. He didn't know a thing. But
Right. Exactly. And again, I have to, especially in this state, I have to listen to a progressive caucus. We all have to listen to a progressive caucus, basically who they don't know they know the minimum, if anything, of the macroeconomic economy, of the microeconomic economy, of how a business works, and they have to dictate to someone like me, 40 years older, of what I can and can't do in the state. It's so economically irrational, it's not even funny. And people buy into this for whatever reason. I just don't get it. I don't understand.
well, I had a long client meeting on Thursday of your, shall we say, this is kind of one of your poster people for I want to get out of here, help me do it now kind of thing. And I'll tell you, I walked away thinking this is some of the best work I've ever done in my life. I also walked away saying, has it gotten so sick and so sad where we see what's happening, we know what's happening, and is this what we're coming to? And my biggest concern, as you know, and we've discussed it, is I get very concerned, or perhaps maybe it's beyond the point of concern, of becoming Detroit, because we have a lot of those hallmarks.
Well, most definitely. Here are two keys to our state economy, which is really going to roll the dice for us in the future. As I have made a point many, many times on the show and my writing, that we have roughly in the state of Connecticut over $100 billion worth of short and long-term debt, along with unfunded liabilities. The unfunded liabilities come from an overly generous pension plan for state teachers and for state union and management workers. I know a few places you could work at where you could retire at anywhere from 60 to 80% of your highest salary at your current employer in the private sector. Yet, in the state of Connecticut, that has one of the highest pension benefits in the country, it continues unabated. This past legislative session, there was no mention except for a few brave Republican legislators to say we need to really address the funding of our pension system and what benefits we are paying out, so on and so forth. And as such, we need to get it under control. Well, our pension system, as far as I'm concerned, is seriously, seriously underfunded. So as more and more individuals retire from the state of Connecticut, less and less taxpayers in the state of Connecticut paying their taxes, more and more money has to be borrowed, to the point we will end up like Illinois, where their pension plan is basically broke, and they can't fund it anymore. And Illinois at one point reached a situation they were not able to pay any of their bills for 1 year until they could get a budget and funding down with regards to how they're going to pay all these particular issues. I'll point out in this session, the unionized state workers were asked by Governor Lamont to accept new limits on the annual inflation increase for their pensions. They declined that request. The case was closed. So pensions are going to continue to increase in the future. They're going to continue to be underfunded. So where are we getting the money from? No answers whatsoever. The second issue, as more and more individuals move out of state, in the past 3 years, we've had roughly over 15,000 people move out of state, and this is a net loss of population, one of the few states of the country that has it, the only state in New England that has it. That continues to impact tax revenues within the state of Connecticut, especially when people who are, quote-unquote, the evil millionaires who live in the state are moving out to pay less taxes. Those less taxes that are being paid have a direct impact on the state revenue that's coming in, and therefore will only increase taxes and increase the $100 billion plus short and long-term debt along with unfunded liability. No answer whatsoever. No answer whatsoever in this legislative session. Nothing. And the media just, this is a goodbye. Oh, don't worry about it. No big deal. It really, really, really bothers me that there has been no addressing of these problems and these bloated salaries, benefits, and pensions that are being paid to both management and non-union workers in the state of Connecticut.
Well, and just to get off of this particular, the opening discussion, which really you could do a show on that, the pass-through entity tax, I've been pretty vocal about this. I see it as what we call in the trade as form over substance, and it's a line from one of my favorite movies of all time, Requiem for a Heavyweight, where Jackie Gleason says to Julie Harris, with respect to Anthony Quinn, who's the broken down boxer, she's trying to rehabilitate him, you can't put a tuxedo on a gorilla and make him a dancing partner. And that's exactly what's happening here. And more to come on that, because I think that may be a show, and I had some very interesting developments about that yesterday. But where you've got a result, And I'm the first to say, I think, there's a workaround now in the U.S. Senate that I think brings needed relief, because I think they rushed to complete the bill, and there's things needing adjustment, that being one. But, it's... I think it comes down to where a local governing body thinks, well, we write the laws for the world, and guess what? They don't. They don't. That's my view.
Well,
but
they feel, again, to try to understand the logic somehow of what they're trying to present is that they feel people are in need. They feel evil businesses, evil people with money, or all people that supposedly have money, however the definition of having money is, whether it's $10,000, whether it's $10 million, they're somehow evil unless they're part of the Democratic Party, unless they're part of liberalism in general. So those people who are supposedly being taken advantage need protection. So a lot of these laws, theoretically, are trying to protect that downtrodden person. Well, how does a downtrodden person become better? They have to try to get skills, they have to try to get education, they have to work, they have to better themselves. They can't take drugs, they can't be an alcoholic, they can't steal, they can't go to prison, so on and so forth. These are just general norms in our society. So liberalism has twisted it around that, okay, it's okay for us to be millionaires, you are not allowed to have more income than me because I want to control it. I want to dictate to you what we can and can't have. So in Connecticut is just a prime example of this. That we supposedly, in a population of 3.5 million people, what do we have? 3 million people who are downtrodden, and 500,000 people controlling to the 3 million what they can and can't have. I would twist everything around and say, at the most, we probably have 100 to 200,000 downtrodden people, and we're forcing 3.3 million people to suffer to try to help those 200,000 people that really, in many cases, don't want any help. So how does this work? I mean, there's no logic anymore.
Well, and I had I'm not gonna say this was easy for me, but I had finished on Thursday with this meeting I had with this. All of our clients are dear and precious. This one very, very much so, especially. And it was a lot to do, and we got everything done. And I got into the car. I pulled out onto the road, and there's a melee going on. On the right-hand side of the road, there's an overdose. On the left-hand side of the road, there is a marijuana dispensary with a line going out of the door. I then make a turn, and I start to head back to the 91, and there's more ODing going on, and I'm like, Bob, I was speechless. It's like, and I am of the mind where I'm like, if you want to go do something, you go do it. Just don't become a burden on society. If you want to drink to your brains blow out. Just don't go in a car and kill people. I've seen that happen too many times. It's happened too many times to people, who are near and dear to me. And it's like, I'll make this pleasant. Ross Perot said when he was running for president that there's a big difference in a society that makes computer chips as opposed to potato chips. we're kind of...
And New Haven, unfortunately, and many big cities in Connecticut and throughout our country are turning into this issue where drug abuse is so rampant it's not even funny. And again, obviously, because we are a compassionate society, we don't want to see a person kill themselves. So now our resources for the police and for the fire are going to try to help people who obviously are drug addicts and want to overdose, so on, or
And I'm just my ears are resonating with what you're saying. I've had the meeting, particularly on Thursday, where this lovely lady turned into this snarling beast. As to, and I mean, we're really good friends. And believe me, it's I've often said that it's your job to do your best regardless, and you deal with the facts that are there, and you do the best you can to make it better. But when she saw what her state tax liabilities were like, and went off on this thing of, and she started really to scream to the point where I was getting concerned, and she was like, "I have a target on my back. I'll spare you the obscenities." And it's like, and it was. I'm thinking, I grew up thinking that we needed to pay taxes because that was the difference in our society and others, because we needed a democracy so we could govern the way that we would be free to say what we could and do the best we could. And I'll tell you, in 40 years, as they used to say during the 1950s, the DJs would say, that took a toll from the heels, let me tell you.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, your client is multiplied by how many in the state of Connecticut who are actual targets, that they want these individuals to pay an extraordinary amount of taxes for whatever reason, so they can continue their liberal, garbage in Hartford. And it's not working. It's failing. And people are frustrated. Taxpayers are frustrated. People who've worked all their lives, that grown a business, that want to hand the business down to their children. Sticker shock tax-wise. It's anti-business legislation all the time, especially in liberal states like Connecticut, to negate that individual's hard work over a lifetime. It is inherently wrong. And again, when more and more people start really complaining, and I'll lead this into the toll protests that we're seeing in Connecticut, which the Democratic Party is very, very concerned about, because the anti-toll group that is in Connecticut is very vocal, it's very active, it is not giving up. They have been picketing at the state legislature on a daily basis. Democratic legislators are concerned because when they're going to try to ramrod tolls through the state of Connecticut, the kickback on it is going to be very, very severe. Very, very severe. Because to me, the proposal that they have for tolls is basically a very, very poor proposal of 53 tolling places in the state of Connecticut, which are not going to relieve congestion in any way, shape, or form. For the simple reason, the only way the Federal Transportation Administration allows tolls now for any state that doesn't have them, they have to propose it so that it eliminates congestion in that particular state. I don't see how tolls are going to eliminate congestion on I-91 or I-95 at rush hour, nor do I see how they're going to be self-sufficient. So that means tolls will just continue to increase dramatically to try to offset all the bureaucratic costs of trying to implement the program. So, again, people with targets, they're going to be even targeted more. Individual who delivers oil and gasoline and heating oil, who operates here in Meredith, basically said, to me, it's going to cost over $500,000 a year in tolls if they're implemented with the routes that he has to drive all his trucks on. $500,000. Where's the money going to come from? So what's that mean? Gasoline's going to be $4 a gallon here in Connecticut because of tolls? It's quite possible.
Wow. Well, and you mention it in those terms, and you're right, because it's not only A to B; it's the cost of getting from A to B.
Again, in Connecticut, because we have an antiquated distribution system for gasoline and oil, many tankers have to drive to a actual distribution center, and many of them have to drive to New Haven to pick up heating oil and pick up diesel fuel and pick up gasoline. They have to get back on the highway. They have to offload it and or deliver it. They have to go back and forth, back and forth. Well, you know what? What's the solution? Don't drive. Don't heat your homes with heating oil.
Yeah.
Don't use diesel fuel and
Okay, now we've said a lot as we wind down, and these are the difficulties. We were talking this week, and I guess you had sent to me that article that David Walker had written, the Comptroller General, and he was sitting on the Municipal Assistance Board for the Troubled Municipalities, Navy guy, straight shooter. And he pretty much said in 500 words or less, this is what needs to happen in this state. And, all the stuff that, you've been saying, I've been saying to legislators that more or less no one really responds to, or they pretend it isn't happening. And it's the institutional bond guys now stay away from me because even their underwear is starting to show in Connecticut as to what's really going to happen to a lot of this municipal debt. When you're talking about where David Walker tells you that Bridgeport should go bankrupt, I'm sorry.
It should go bankrupt because it does not have the ability to pay its current debt and its future debt. And again, you're in business and you've got $200,000 a year in revenue and you got $2 million worth of debt. What are you going to do? At some point, you're just going to throw it in. You're going to go bankrupt. And Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, Waterbury, these are all our troubled towns and cities in the state of Connecticut. They all should go bankrupt. And eventually, Connecticut will go bankrupt if it can't get its debt in order and its spending in order.
Well, and I guess that's my point. Here we are. You mentioned, this legislative session, and I'll say both parties gave no heed and no concern whatsoever to the fact that these are big issues and these are things that really need to be fixed to make this state attractive to others, to make it to outside investment. To look at outside investment will look at it and say, hey, this is a happening thing. They've turned the corner. And this is where I rack my brain, and this is kind of like maybe a good place to take this over and out. I think of Howard Jarvis in 1978 in California saying, that's enough with the property taxes. And the state caught on to it, and they capped the property taxes at the level it was, 1% of purchase value. And it's, and I'm not, whether that's a good or bad thing, at least to me, that particular policy, it showed what an electorate could do with respect to pressuring a legislature to do something that was economically sound in concept. Here we are. This is what's happening. What can we all do?
Well, a variety of things. Number one, we have to become much more vocal by emailing and calling the governor's office, our state reps, our state senators. We need to write letters to the editor. And we also now, I really think we need a couple constitutional amendments in the state of Connecticut to try to take back Connecticut. Number one, we need a right to recall our elected officials, which we do not have currently. And we also need a Proposition Type 13 in the state of Connecticut to cap all state spending at 1% increase or 0.5% or a frozen budget for 2 years and some sort of debt payoff plan. That's the only way Connecticut can right itself. And we also need to have some sort of balance in our legislature. We can't have, as we've seen for years on end, a one-party rule of the Democratic Party with their chronic punishment of the Connecticut taxpayer, their chronic punishment of the working middle class of the state of Connecticut. It has to stop. But we have to become vocal. You and I are vocal, along with a handful of other people. We have to multiply ourselves to thousands and thousands of the 3.5 million people here in Connecticut and really start complaining and start being a thorn in the side of these individuals who feel that they can, pull the wool over our eyes on a daily basis. It's the only way it's going to change, Tony. You and I both know it.
It's very interesting, and I'll close at this. Given the week that I had, I had very little energy. I sat on the couch last night. Kathy's down the far end. The turtle chasing dog is in between, and I'm on the right. And I have I don't mind saying it, I have a Roku. I love the Roku, especially the free channels. And it was a nostalgia channel, and I was watching. There was a movie made in 1951, and it's free. You can see it on the internet. It's called you can change the world. And it was a number of people who were in Hollywood at the time, and a Catholic priest, I believe his name was Father James Keller, who went on to found the Marymount Missions and the things that went beyond, and the Christophers. And I don't know a whole lot about that as far as other than knowing that the mission exists. But the whole point of it was that you need, and this is like close to 70 years ago, you need good people in good places that are functional to what we all do, government, education, writing, the arts, so that you can change things where one person can change a whole lot of people just by what that one person does. I really, really, really believe that. Maybe I'm crazy, but I'm I'm playing on the same team that you are.
Tony, it's very true, and I'll close by saying I wrote my first letter to the editor when I was 13 years old in 1971 for the New Haven Register, and in it I will never forget, I wrote, I didn't understand the world I was living in. We were fighting communism, yet we were selling wheat to Russia at the time.
Yes, we were.
Didn't make sense to me then, and it still does not make sense to me now.
Well, and this is the thing. I mean, yes, I am a business owner of several businesses, and I am a proud capitalist, but yet I believe capitalism should have a soul, and when it doesn't, it bothers me, and I become very angry with that, because I believe you can do a lot through profitable capitalism to change the world. Again, call me crazy, but as our mutual friend, my friend for years and on the broadcast side, Bob Lazzari's father would say to me, "Hey, Tony, when they tell you it's not about the money, it's about the money."
Exactly.
Bob, God bless you. Take care. I know we'll be talking soon. Please say hi to Brenda.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. Bye now.
Okay.
Many years ago, this was our town, USA. Our family and neighbors lived in the most beautiful land that man would ever see. One day, some tourists stopped by on their way west. They were as excited about our beautiful location as we were. A little too excited. In fact, they were thoughtless and wasteful. They just didn't seem to know the rules about living in the forest. Well, before long it happened. A wildfire destroying everything in its path. And within a few minutes, our beautiful home was gone. 100 years have passed. Times have changed. But some people haven't. Their carelessness still causes more than 90,000 forest fires every year.
Remember, only you can prevent forest fires.
Really, really pleased to have Bob Swick on today. Bob tells you where it's at in terms of what's happening in economics and politics. So grateful to have him as a contributor and as a friend. We'll be back next week with another familiar guest, Dr. Lori Nadell. June is PTSD month, and we'll be talking about PTSD and what it means in the lives of so many. So, from Tony D'Angelo, here on Tony D'Angelo's PM Coast to Coast, the AM edition, and for everybody on the staff, we wish you a terrific week. We'll see you back here next week. Thanks, everybody. God bless. Thanks for listening.